Back to Roundball Stew, presented by Roto World and NBC Sports Edge. I'm Dan Titus, Yahoo Fantasy Basketball Analyst, joined with Raphielle Johnson, also of Roto World and NBC Sports Edge. We're going to talk about the NBA Finals. Congratulations to the Denver Nuggets for claiming their first NBA championship. We learned a lot from both the Nuggets and the Heat, so we'll talk about that. And then we'll also get into some notable news and rumors circulating from around the league as we inch closer to the draft, which is one of my favorite times of the year. But Raph, first and foremost, man, what did you think of those NBA Finals?
It was competitive. It wasn't like your usual gentleman's sweep where you think the winning team kind of just goes asleep for a game. I thought Denver played well throughout, and they were challenged by Miami because they couldn't really afford to have that game off, so to speak. Miami just ran out of gas. I don't know how healthy Jimmy Butler really was, at the end of it, because we really didn't see those explosive games after he sprained his ankle in the New York series. But they got Nikola Jokic, who is unquestionably the best player in the NBA right now. Jamal Murray, he's back. I think he's a bona fide top 20, top 25 caliber player right now. This team is set up contract-wise, with one notable exception that we'll get to a little bit later. They're set up to go on a bit of a run here. So congrats to Denver, and we'll see what they do, these next couple of years. I think they can rip off a couple more titles.
About to say, if they can rip off a couple more titles, we could be talking dynasty mode here. And from what I've seen, for how deep this squad is and for the way that they invested the combination of veteran leadership, like, getting the DeAndre Jordans on the bench. You got the Jeff Greens. He's a free agent. But, I think that the pedigree also with bringing in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with people like Christian Braun. And, this Jamal Murray playing outside of his mind. And then you have the MVP and probably the best big man ever in Nikola Jokic. Congratulations to him. Much well-deserved MVP. Arguably could have been regular season MVP too, but just absolute monster in the playoffs. Averaged 30 points, 13 boards, 9.5 assists. 9.5 assists, almost 2 threes, 2 stocks. Everyone talks about how Jokic doesn't play defense. Obviously, they're not watching basketball. This man was all over the place. But just absolutely historical finals with 30 points, 14 boards, 7 dimes, shot almost 59% from the field, 42% from 3. Like, come on, man. Like, the guy's a human cheat code and just so humble. I just really appreciated, like, in this finals, we had such humble superstars in this, like even on the other side with Jimmy Butler, very team first guy. So as much as this was like, a pretty deciding gentleman's sweep, I really enjoyed it. Like, it was great to see Jamal Murray get back to this stage that we last saw him in the bubble, just go completely nuclear. So let's talk about that for a minute. Nikola Jokic got MVP. I think you could also make the case that Jamal Murray was certainly worthy of it. He averaged 21 points, 6 boards, and 10 dimes in the finals. What did you see from Jamal Murray that makes you excited about him being a top 20 or top 25 pick going into next season?
I would say the decision-making, in addition to his scoring ability, being further removed from that ACL tear. First 4 games of the finals, he had 10 or more assists. That was the first time in NBA history, I believe, that a player had 10 or more assists in each of his first 4 finals games. So I think the improvement there, the turnovers were a bit high in game 5, but given how tight the game was and how much Miami was going to fight, it's not really a surprise. And he still had 8 assists. So I think that kind of worked out in his favor as it is. So, a full season, another season removed from the knee injury, I don't think there will be any types of restrictions on him going into next year because there was still some injury management, work done early in this season for him. But I think he's at that point where we thought he would continue to build from in the bubble, and he's just going to go even higher. I think he's got even more to give from a production standpoint.
Yeah, he was top 50. He was just outside the top 50 this year in 9 cat leagues. So I think he can make that jump into that top 30, top 25 conversation for sure. I'm going to make him a 3rd round pick. I think we'll see how this offseason goes. He may even get into the late 2nd round because, as you said, I think it's the decision-making, that jump, because he was really just a score first guard before. But I think you saw in the finals how dominant he could be in the pick and roll and then the dribble handoff with Jokic. I mean, the Heat were one of the best teams at adjusting, whether it be a zone defense or just giving you multiple different looks. And they just could not figure out that 2-man game. And it just, I don't know. I think it just goes to show the maturation that he's made in his game, that he can do stuff other than score. And he was doing that at a high clip too. So I really like Jamal Murray. Let's talk about Michael Porter Jr. though, because he didn't have the NBA Finals production that he had throughout the playoffs. Like, he was a knockdown shooter for much of the playoffs, and then he just kind of lost his shot in the finals, but really did hit the glass. And I think that that's an area where I would love to see more improvement from him, like more sustainment in that area, because I think that could really increase his fantasy value if you can get, near double-double with Michael Porter Jr. He's never going to give you any assists, but, the threes, the points, and the rebounds, I think that could be huge.
Yeah, he's just outside top 75 in 9-cat this year during the regular season, 5.5 rebounds per game. As you noted, he was much better during the playoffs, especially the finals. And I think for me, that's the biggest sign of potential for him. Like, we've seen in the past where he and a lot of other score-first guys let their shot dictate what they do in other areas. I thought he moved past that in this playoff run. So I think having the evidence that doing so will reward you in the form of a championship, I think that's going to help him even more. I don't know how high I draft, but I still have him in like that 7th round range, I guess I would say. But I don't know if I'd go too much lower than that, just because I think the scoring is going to be there. Far better shooter than what we saw in the finals. And that rebounding, if he can continue on that path, he's going to be a very good fantasy player. I think my one concern would be the brace that he had to play in on his left leg because of the back issues and what that caused in other areas. Does he get that off this offseason, or is it something that he's going to have to continue to deal with moving forward?
Yeah, injuries are always a concern with Michael Porter Jr. 2 seasons ago, he balled out. I think that really raised his fantasy stock, and then he kind of had a down year once Jamal Murray kind of entered the fold, along with other assets like Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. But yeah, I don't know that I'm going to expect him to drop, 18 points a game. I think it's probably going to settle somewhere in that 17 range. But if you can get that 5.5 up to about 7 or 8, I think that's a well-worthy, mid-round pick, as you suggested. I would prefer him over like a Tobias Harris type of a guy. But, would still probably go in the same range. But yeah, I think that he's here to stay, man. I was just looking at, before we hopped on the show, I was looking at his contract. My gosh, he's going to be in Denver for a while with that kind of a cap hit. But that's the beauty about the Denver Nuggets, the way that they've organized their roster. They can afford to have these lower end guys because they drafted them. They got them for a good deal. And it's not as much of a cap hit to them, that they can still keep the stars like Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And Jokic doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to want to, be a mercenary here and travel to different teams. Like, I think he's going to be pretty locked into that Denver scenario for a while. And if Jamal Murray's smart, he'll ride those coattails, because I think that's a dope combo, one of the best NBA duos that we can see in the league right now. But let's talk about some unheralded guys, mainly Bruce Brown, because he came over last offseason, signed a 2-year deal worth upwards almost of $14 million. But the beauty of it, he signed with a player option. So he was supposed to make 6.8 going into next season. Now that he's got a championship, and now that he was proven to be like a legitimate sixth man for this Nuggets team throughout the postseason, and I would say much of the regular season too, he's probably going to opt out.
Yeah.
What are the chances do you think that he stays?
Well, Denver doesn't hold his bird rights, so the most they can pay him is a little under $8 million. He's going to be an 8-figure player next season. So unless Denver has some things that they can work out on the salary front to free up additional money, I think he's going to end up being somewhere else. He was miscast. I think he started out in Detroit, obviously, as their draft pick, and then Brooklyn. They just threw him at the 4. Like, well, he can't shoot very well. And
he's not a point guard.
Yeah, it's like, what are you guys doing? Because anyone who watched him at Miami, or even his high school and grassroots days, that there's some creative ability in there. The jump shot wasn't there, but there are ways to work around that besides jamming him into the 4 spot. No, Brooklyn was able to utilize him well some in that like short roll kind of game, which was helpful, but I still think there's untapped potential. Going to Denver remove that ceiling, so to speak. So I think wherever he goes, he'll have more leeway to make some things happen with the ball in his hands, be a more versatile player who's simply out on the perimeter. Because the last thing you want to do with a talent like Bruce Brown is just tell him you're playing the 4 because you can't shoot. his shot has improved as well. So that's the other thing to make note of here. I hope he goes back to Denver, but that bread's looking too good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a media outlet definitely asked him, hey, where do you want to be next season? He said, I want to stay in Denver. But as you said, they can't offer him as much money. And a player like Bruce Brown, who's already been on a few teams, you got to expect that he wants to get paid and know his worth. So I'm curious of whether he can earn a starting spot somewhere, like if that appeals to him, because if he stays with Denver, he's going to be coming off the bench. So we'll kind of see. There's something that's definitely worth monitoring, but he's definitely going to be declining that player option, and rightfully so, because he could command well over $10 million in free agency. Jeff Green. One of the interesting things about Jeff Green is that, this guy almost lost his life, like had an aneurysm, had to made his way back to the court. Played over 16 years, but like if you look at the laundry list of players that this guy has played with, he's touched just about every player in the league, from Hall of Famers, Paul Pierce, Chris Paul, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, James Harden, like the list goes on. And now he gets Nikola Jokic, finally gets a ring. What does this mean for Jeff Green? Do you think he's going to continue his playing career? Has he pretty much reached that pinnacle that he was looking for? What do you think about him? But I think he was a great locker room guy, and also played pivotal minutes for those Denver Nuggets as the backup center to Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, he was a starter for a large portion of last season, even just because of injuries. And it sounded like, based on his quotes earlier in the series, that he wants to play another couple seasons. And I think at his price point would be affordable enough for Denver to keep him. So I expect him to be there in a similar role next season, maybe even the season after that, backing up Aaron Gordon, backing up Jokic when they want to go small at times too. So, I don't think he's obviously not like a fantasy asset. He's probably someone that you pick up if he happens to get a spot start. But Uncle Jeff's still putting in work, man.
Definitely still putting in work. So in terms of anyone else on this Denver roster, do you think Christian Braun will earn more minutes going into next season? Is there anybody else on the roster that you would say is on your radar as a late round flyer, or anyone that's moved up in your draft?
I think Christian Braun for sure, just because we saw he kind of yo-yoed in and out of the rotation throughout the playoffs, fell out against the Lakers, was back in against the Heat. I think he's going to be a solid rotation piece for them, especially if they lose Bruce Brown. I'd keep an eye on Peyton Watson, at least early on, see what his role may be in the preseason. Didn't play much during this year, obviously. Wasn't in the rotation at all in the finals run. But he's someone that if they need some additional depth, especially a combo forward type guy, I think he could be someone that can get a few more opportunities next season.
Yeah, I think the key to unlocking him is certainly if Bruce Brown stays or leaves. Otherwise, I feel like he's going to be like a seventh man, but he could have, definitely spots where you may want to pick him up on waivers if there's an injury, or, maybe he starts getting a little bit more into the rotation. But I think what we saw from him was the ability to play off ball, which is huge. Playing with Jokic, he makes the right cuts. Also makes the right basketball plays, great on defense. And I think that's what's really going to earn him minutes on the court, is continuing to play that defense, taking charges, being scrappy and gritty. But yeah, super young. So I think there's a lot of upside for him. Dynasty stock definitely rising. In terms of redraft, probably not draftable just yet, but keep an eye on the Bruce Brown situation, because I think that could definitely open up some more looks for him on the court next year. The Denver Nuggets have pick number 40 this year. Are you expecting anything? Like, I haven't even gotten into the draft that deep yet, but maybe they might be interested in trading up. They do have a deep bench that they could probably deliver some assets off to, but right now it's only looking like a second round pick.
Yeah, I'm not expecting too much. I think if anything, maybe they're a draft and stash candidate, try to save some money. To potentially bring back Bruce Brown if they can figure out a way to make those numbers work. But yeah, I wouldn't expect too much from that 40th pick out of them.
Yeah, and make sure that stay up on all of the news, the latest from the people that are opting in, people that are opting out. Now that the NBA Finals is over, there's going to be a lot more breaking news. So make sure you download the Roto World app and receive that breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting your favorite players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. And it's available in your app store today. So we talked about the Denver Nuggets side of things. Let's go to the Miami Heat, who defied most of the odds all season long. My gosh, man, the 8 seed making it all the way to the finals. They lost in the playing game and still wind up finding a way to get to the championship. Just absolute resiliency throughout the postseason with this team. They lost Tyler Herro in the first round versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Everybody thought that they were done. And then they unlocked Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson comes off the bench. I mean, just a bunch of unheralded guys that just got it done, led by Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Let's talk about just first your initial thoughts on the run that Miami made. Was this one of the most unprecedented things you've seen in your time of watching hoops? It was for me. Like I mean, just looking at it on paper, right? Like I'm like, yo, this team is extremely outmatched versus Giannis, even the Knicks, and they just got it done. Then you go to the Celtics, took care of business. Like just an improbable run, man. I was at a loss of words. I enjoyed it. Awesome experience.
Yeah, I think they're one of 2 8 seeds to ever reach the NBA Finals. The other one's in the 99 Knicks, and that was part of a lockout shortened season. So playing 50 games versus 82, then you add in the 2 play-in games. I think Miami had like 45 clutch games throughout the season. The games decided by 5 points or less.
Insane.
That would give you a heart attack for some fans out there to play that many close games. But the fact that they were able to reach this point says a lot about the resilience of that franchise, Eric Spoelstra and his staff, and then the players. Much was made about how many of them were undrafted, but wherever you go in the draft, I think if you have that fight in you, you can achieve some great things. They didn't win the title, but hey, they got a lot closer than any of us thought they would.
Yeah, they did. And I think it's just the Heat culture, man. Spo definitely did his job. And like I think I've seen a couple comparisons online. It was like, oh, their clutch performers are like the Minnesota Vikings. I know you don't watch football like that, but the Vikings last season were just like completely over expectation in terms of their win percentage based on how many close games they had. Because the year prior, they lost all the games when they're in the clutch moment. So, but the Heat are just different, man. And initially, I thought that the Jimmy Butler contract was a bit rich, but he's improved over the length of this contract since he's been in Miami. And so going into next season, he was a top 12. He was like a top 15 player this year, right? He was top. I think it was 11 in head-to-head leagues. He played over 60 games. Is he a first-round pick?
I think you can definitely make that argument for him.
Are you going to pick him in the first round?
I'll say this. If I have a pick towards the back end of the first round, like 11 or 12, right before the turn, I would strongly consider taking Jimmy Butler. I think if in that case, you would try to pair him up with a star who's more, I don't know if I'd say durable, but if you can get him alongside a star that will play 70, 75 games a season, I would definitely try to do that with my first 2 picks in drafts. He may not make too many 3-pointers during the regular season, but everything else that he does more than covers up for that with regard to his overall fantasy value. So, yeah, I think if anything, we're just waiting to see just how hurt that ankle was, because the explosiveness that we saw in that Milwaukee series wasn't there once he injured it against the Knicks. He was still productive when he was out there, but I think, is it just a matter of needing rest, or is there a bit more at play there? That would be the big question for him going into this summer, I think.
Yeah, respect to him. He never makes any excuses.
Yep.
Everyone kept on asking him about the ankle injury, and he kept on deferring, saying, nah, it's just we got to play better. I want to win. I think his ankle will be fine. Once he actually gets an off season, like, as you said, they played a lot of games this year, and, his maintenance schedule, I think there is probably some wear and tear there that he's going to need to rest in the off season. Kick his feet up, get to the beach, chill out, drink his $100 cups of coffee, and kind of rejuvenate going into next season. But I would take Jimmy Butler in the late first. I think pairing him with like a Mikal Bridges would be a really fun roster. Get a lot of steals. You have 2 among the most in steals right there. Good field goal percentages and good free throw percentages. But yeah, I think pairing him with a guy that can play at least 70, 80 games, that's definitely what you want to look for. But yeah, I think he's earned the right. Like the efficiency that he has at the guard spot won't give you many threes, but he gives you pretty much everything else. And there isn't a lot of competition in terms of usage on the Miami Heat. Tyler Herro, we'll talk about him. Actually, might as well talk about him now. He was cleared for Game 5, but he ultimately didn't play. I think that was just Spo thinking that, hey, I don't want to integrate him in literally the last, closeout game scenario when people like Strus and Duncan Robinson have been putting in this work. Probably would have disrupted the momentum, but they wound up losing anyway. But he signed a hefty deal last year, along with Jordan Poole. Probably that's some substantial money.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Herro, and can he take like another jump? Because he was a very good fantasy player. Averaged over 20 points, close to 5 assists, 5 rebounds. So is that your expectation for him to go into next season as well?
I think he can push top 50. I don't know if I would put him right within that threshold right now, but I think he's capable of doing it. A top 75 player this season. If anything, you want to see that field goal percentage go up. For him shooting a little under 44% from the field during the regular season, I think he's capable of better. Maybe that goes hand in hand with Jimmy Butler's availability. When you don't have that creator out there as much as you need him to be, that can put a little bit more on Tyler's shoulders than he can probably handle right now in his career from a creation standpoint. Yeah. Also, the Kyle Lowry factor. Lowry was hurt for a large chunk of the season with his knee issues. So I think if anything, if you get those two healthy, we'll see what happens with Lowry, or if Miami tries to make a deal for a point guard that can kind of help push him over the hump. See how that impacts Herro's shooting percentage, because the free throw shooting is there, the 3-point shooting is there. You just need that overall field goal percentage to go up a bit to improve his fantasy value.
Man, you mentioned Lowry. He's carrying a hefty price tag, 29 million, almost 30 million going into next season, and that is guaranteed. So at 30, man, that is a lot of bread. So this is the problem here. You got Kyle Lowry making 30 million. Jimmy's going to be making at least close to 40 probably. Tyler Herro's got at least 20? Yeah, he's got 27. Jimmy's got 45. Bam's got 32. Where's the money for Strus and Gabe Vincent? I don't know, because I'm reading some rumors that they could command upwards of 15 million in the offseason. So I don't know, that they might be gone.
Yeah, and then also Victor Oladipo's got a player option for 9.5.
I mean, he's probably going to take that.
He ain't turning that down. He's not turning. I don't think anybody would turn that down. Given the injury,
given his health issues, he's staying there.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, finding the available dollars for Vincent and Strus. I thought Kevin Love gave them good minutes when they added him to the mix. So there's some keys there. I think Miami's one of those teams that, because of the finances and the new CBA, they're going to have to be really active in the trade market this offseason. I know we've heard Damian Lillard name mentioned in connection to Miami. Kyrie Irving, he'll be a free agent, but I don't really see how that would happen beyond a sign and trade with Dallas. And then you have to ask, what would Dallas's motivation be to do that? I think, I don't know, what Kyle Lowry gave them because of injuries this season, you can't pay that type of price tag for it. So I think they're going to have to make some moves to improve the point guard position, at minimum from a health standpoint, because I think that holds the key to whether or not they can win a title next year.
Yeah. And Caleb Martin had a great postseason run as well. Yeah. I think he's probably going to be in contention for a starting spot next year. He started a bunch of games for the Miami Heat this year. He is their 4, especially with Kevin Love being an unrestricted free agent. There's not many bodies left behind him. Looks like they extended a qualifying offer to Omer Yurtseven. We'll see. He hasn't really given them much. I was excited about seeing him a couple years ago, but he just really hasn't figured out how to crack the lineup. But that Duncan Robinson, 18 million, I think that's probably going to be a trade piece for him.
To be fair to Omer, he was injured for a large chunk of this season. So, I mean, he was like a fantasy all-star for like that 3-week stretch last season. But Yeah, he
20
played
and
well
10
enough. Yeah.
guaranteed.
Yep. Exactly. So.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like if anybody increased their trade stock, it was Duncan Robinson.
Yeah.
18 million. Like, I feel like some team that needs a sharpshooter will probably figure it out. Like, hey, we'll take him on. Tyler Herro is probably a decent asset to trade. He didn't hurt his value in the postseason because he was hurt the whole time. But he already has 25-5 potential. So if they want to make a move for Dame, it's probably gonna have to include a couple of those guys. I would hope they don't come off of Bam, but that might actually have to be, if you're landing someone like Dame, it's going to cost you. But I feel like, I don't know, Bam, as much as Jimmy was talking about Bam in the media, like saying how important he was to securing a championship, it would be off of his back if it was going to happen. As much of the same relationship that I saw when Jimmy was in Philly with Embiid. So I don't think he's going to lose. I don't think Bam's going to go anywhere. Like, I think he's going to be a cornerstone for this franchise. He proved it after averaging 21 points, 12 boards, and 3 dimes in the finals, and had a pretty dominant postseason run too. 18 points, almost 10 rebounds, and 4 dimes. Pretty much what he did in the regular season. So speaking about Bam, what are your thoughts on his performance, and where are you drafting him going into next year?
I think he's off the board before the end of the 3rd round for me. If anything, I think he was a guy that you could see being taken late 2nd in some standard leagues this season. And I think that's a fair place to go with him, because the issues finishing around the basket that he had in the finals, that the Heat had in general, those really weren't an issue throughout the regular season. So I'm not too worried about that. He's proven to be rather durable in terms of the game's played factor. So yeah, I think 3rd round would be fair. If you want to reach, I don't think end of the 2nd is too big of a reach, but I think early 3rd round, working from there, would be a good place to get him.
Yeah, I'd keep him probably at a 3rd round. Would like to see more blocks, but obviously the steals for the big man is definitely solid. Doesn't give you threes. Decent from the line, should be around 80%. He shot 45% in the finals, which it looked like he was, earlier on, it looked like he was going to be far below that. But he got that efficiency back. And I think once he got the confidence to find his spots down the post, he was pretty dominant. So, yeah, I think you can't go wrong with him as a early 3rd round pick. If you want to reach, I could certainly see the argument in it. I probably won't do it, but I could definitely see the move being possible. So the Heat do have the 18th pick in the draft, which we already talked about their cash strapped right now. That pick is probably going to be, anywhere in the neighborhood of like $3.5 million that they're going to have to pay someone. Is there a chance that they're going to trade this, or what do you think? Maybe that's a possible lure in trying to get a veteran player in the offseason.
I think that's always something to consider, to attach to one of those veterans that may be on an undesirable contract, so to speak, to try to help sweeten the deal there. So, like you mentioned, the money, they're a bit cash strapped right now in terms of the salary cap and luxury tax thresholds. So I think I would not be surprised if they try to move the pick. I think if they hold it at 18, that's a point in the draft where you can find some versatile 3-and-D potential type wings, like Ryan Rupert, New Zealand Breakers, native of France, but playing professional last year. I think he measured out like a 7'2" wingspan. He's like 6'6". So you put that type of length in the different defensive schemes that the Heat like to run, that can make for an intriguing possibility. Still has work to do offensively, but I think he's someone to keep an eye on in that like late teens, early 20s portion of the draft.
That's a good call there. And speaking of draft, we're going to be getting into way more draft talk, but like every season, it is draft season. Get your Roto World Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your football, baseball, and basketball drafts. Yahoo Fantasy Basketball will be opening up in July, so you can get really started early on some draft content. I'll be doing my first round of rankings, I think in a couple of weeks, so look out for that. But it'll be packed with profiles, rankings, projections. Order today and get all 3 Roto World Draft Guides for the price of 2. Plus, use promo code BERRY, that is BERRY, and save an extra 20% at checkout. So yeah, the Heat. So is there any other people of the Heat? Like, so Caleb Martin, do you think he's worthy of being a mid to late round draft pick next year?
I would say late round to be safe. He really wasn't on many draft boards coming into this season. I think he's outperform those fantasy expectations. So I think if you can take a late round flyer on him, I don't think it would be a bad pick at all.
What about Max Strus?
Man, I think that's
higher
really
or lower than Caleb Martin?
I would go lower, just because Caleb's defensive potential, I like that a little bit more than Strus. So that would be the reason why. I think obviously Strus can give you a bit more in terms of the perimeter shooting, 3-pointers. But I think overall, I would go with Caleb Martin before I went with Max Strus.
And Tyler Herro, you still have him as a top 50 guy, top 75. Where are you picking him? 5th, 6th round?
I'm saying about 75. If he's off the board before then, I won't lose too much sleep over it if he's off the board at that point. But yeah, I think 7th round would be fine for his value.
Okay. And then Gabe Vincent is probably going to likely be tied to wherever destination he goes, kind of similar to Max Strus and not Duncan Robinson, Max Strus and Caleb Martin. Yes, excuse me. All right, so let's get to some notable news going around the league. I think first and foremost, Underdog Fantasy always gets to these alerts a little bit too quickly sometimes. And they initially said that the Phoenix Suns were waiving Chris Paul. That appeared to be fake news for a time. He is not waived by the Phoenix Suns, but should he be available? He's been getting calls and the pursuit from the Lakers, the Clippers, the Knicks, and the Warriors. Should he actually be cut? That is per Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. So I ask you, Raph, out of those places, what do you think is the best fantasy destination for Chris Paul should he ultimately be waived?
I'd say either LA team. The Lakers, they had D'Angelo Russell, but he'll be a free agent. And I don't think he showed enough to be like a starting point guard on a title contending team. Is he a starting point guard in the NBA? Yes, I believe so. But if you have championship aspirations, I don't know if he's the guy. So I think Chris Paul could be a good fit there. It'd be kind of funny because the late David Stern shut down that trade.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, from the Pelicans to the Lakers years ago, and he wound up with the Clippers. The Clippers also have questions at the point. Russell Westbrook will be a free agent. I thought he did reasonably well there as a late season addition, but Chris Paul, when you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George in terms of scores, having Chris Paul out there could help them in terms of getting them into proper spots to score. That said, unlike Westbrook, you're going to have the durability question with Chris Paul as you already do with Kawhi and Paul. So that's something to weigh. I don't think the Warriors would be a great fit, and I don't know how they fit him in financially either. Draymond Green has his player option. Klay Thompson's up for a contract extension. They really need to improve that depth, but I don't know if they have the money to do it. And Bob Myers won't be calling the shots. So how's that all going to go down in terms of Mike Dunleavy Jr., Kirk Lacob? How are they going to handle that? And I sincerely hope the Knicks do not sign Chris Paul if it comes to that. They already have Jalen Brunson, so I don't really see the point in doing that.
Yeah, and Emmanuel quickly too.
Yeah. You're not going to start those two next to each other because of the defensive issues. So you ask them come off the bench.
This is not the Chris Paul of years ago.
Yeah,
right? We're looking at the twilight of his career. So I think you're right. Like, I would say that I think the Lakers is interesting. The Lakers and the Clippers are the most interesting to me. The Clippers, because I think that would they just need a natural point guard. I think him and Ty Lue would probably get along great playing with Kawhi and Paul George. He doesn't have to do much in terms of scoring, just distribute, run the offense, play defense. Durability is the huge question there. I think it's a risk worth taking if I'm the Clippers, but I also understand, the history behind that. But he was a Clipper before, very good on the Clippers, very familiar. I think that would be a good fit. The Lakers, I think, is a good fit just because I don't know that Dennis Schroeder is going to necessarily be back. They could use a point guard. Watching him play with LeBron James and Anthony Davis would be really cool. And again, he doesn't have to do any of the scoring. So I think those are ideal fits. I don't like it with the Knicks. I don't like it with the Golden State Warriors. But we'll see what comes of that. DeAndre Ayton is also on the trade block. It's only a matter of time. we can speculate, but I haven't seen any teams tied to him yet.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that that's something that's going to certainly change by next week, especially heading into the draft, because DeAndre Ayton doesn't want to play for the Phoenix Suns. He's made it known all through last season. It was amazing. He even still ended up finishing in the top 60 despite being pissed off the entire time. But yeah, any thoughts on Ayton and where he potentially may go? I think we'll probably talk about it more next week.
I just hope this doesn't turn into a situation like John Collins in Atlanta.
Facts.
Where it's like every February comes up in trade rumors every offseason, but he's still there. Now, I give John credit for kind of being a good soldier and just playing through it and not really showing any frustration or anything.
Yeah.
Ayton really struggled with that, and I think his relationship with Monty Williams wasn't the best, obviously. We'll see how things go between he and Frank Vogel if they hold on to him. But at this point, you have Kevin Durant, who's I don't think it's a stretch to say he's on the back end of his career. You got Devin Booker. You have a new team owner who doesn't seem too patient, at least with his early moves in terms of letting Monty Williams go. But I think that's going to speed up the timeline for them where they try to figure this thing out sooner rather than later. Regardless of what they do with Ayton, I think the key for them is going to be getting back quality bench production because they really don't have the depth that's going to be required to take on Denver, since they're the new standard bearer in the West and the NBA in general.
Yeah, I have no clue where Ayton's going. Interesting. I mean, maybe Indiana might pop up again just because they were the one that extended the qualifying offer initially that the Phoenix Suns matched to his dismay. So yeah, more to come on that. Ja Morant. So Adam Silver decided to wait until after the NBA Finals to decide the fate of Ja Morant going into the 2023-2024 season. I haven't heard anything yet. What are you expecting in terms of games missed? 20, 50, the whole season?
Hey, I think it'll be closer to 20. Obviously, when you sit down in front of the commissioner and have one talk, the expectation is that you won't do something similar again, much less 2 months after that first conversation. So
but wait, it was a toy. It was a toy.
Okay.
Who is this camp, man? Like, that's the best. Like, just be accountable, bro. Like, what? Don't just stop playing games, man.
Yeah,
you're playing the wrong games. Playing stupid games.
It's ridiculous. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? So, I think it'll be closer to 20 just because you want to be careful when it comes to sending a message to the entire league through one person because that can lead to going a bit too far. And I wonder how much input the Players Association may have in like how long a suspension is because you have obviously collective bargaining and whatnot, and they can file a grievance or an appeal on his behalf if it gets to be too severe. So I think they'll figure out a sweet spot. I don't think it'll reach like the All-Star break because then you're talking about like 45, maybe 50 games. I don't think it'll go that far, but it'll be enough to where he takes a significant hit in the pockets. And if anything, you're preparing for drafts early on. I think Tyus Jones, this probably boosts his standing in fantasy a bit more because we saw how well he played when he was a spot starter. And Ja being suspended for a lengthy stretch, that's going to make Tyus Jones someone that may boost his value a little bit higher than it probably should be in fantasy.
Yeah, you're probably going to have to be moving him up for sure. One player that I'd probably move up even higher would probably be Desmond Bane. I'd probably move him up into the late third, early fourth, I would say.
I'd go third,
mid third, or just early third.
I don't know about early thirds. Then you're talking about like top 25. I don't know if he'll be that good, but I think mid third onward would be a good spot for Desmond Bane.
Yeah, I think he would probably benefit a lot. And then you could probably get Tyus Jones just because he's not doesn't come with as much name notoriety. You could probably get him a little bit later as a mid-round pick. That could certainly be good for the assist to turnover ratio. Not much for threes, but definitely great in steals and shoots a good percentage. So either Jones, Trey, Tyus, like they're just solid point guards. Grant Williams got hand surgery. That's probably good news for him. So he got right in the offseason. He's about to enter free agency. It doesn't look like he's going to be retained by the Boston Celtics. They have a huge contract situation to figure out now that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both earned all NBA. So their super maxes are going to be super crazy hits to that cap. So Grant Williams, I don't have much information about where he's been linked to. I think he's just going to test free agency, but I think he's going to have no shortage of suitors because he's a 6'6" guy, can play multiple positions, guard, play poor. He can guard the power forward or play small forward. So I think he's just going to be a solid player. Don't know that I think he's going to be fantasy relevant, but I think it all depends on the destination. What about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that because he lands in a place where he knows his playing time will be consistent, maybe even starters minutes if he can get it. Yeah, that would do wonders for him in terms of solidifying his fantasy value. I think at most, probably looking at like 9th, 10th round. I think I don't know if I would be going too much higher than that unless he were to go somewhere where he were to be guaranteed a starting job. So I don't think he's going to do like what JaVale McGee did in Dallas, when they guaranteed him being a starter, and then he absolutely bombed this season. I don't think we have to worry about that with Grant Williams, but I don't know. I think, like you said, the destination is going to be key in terms of his fantasy value.
And the Pelicans are looking to move up from their 14th draft pick into the top 3. They're apparently very interested in Scoot Henderson per Shams. Do the Pelicans have the assets to pull that off? And are you surprised that the Pelicans will be looking to move into the top 3 here?
A little bit. I'm trying to pull up their contract information here right now because CJ McCollum's got 3 more years in his deal.
Yeah, he ain't going nowhere.
Zion Williamson starts his new contract, but he's had availability issues amongst some, in addition, some off-court things that we're not really going to get into. But between Zion and Brandon Ingram, I think Ingram, he's got 2 more years left in his deal. The problem with Ingram and Zion is the durability concerns. Zion played 29 games this season, 24 as a rookie. He played a decent amount of games his second season, but I don't know what it is. He can't stay healthy. I don't know what the cuisine is like in Portland compared to New Orleans. If he were moved there, maybe it would help, but I don't know. Like, if you're Portland, you think about the history of that franchise and the bad luck they've had with injuries, from Bill Walton to Sam Bowie to Greg Oden to Brandon Roy. You really want to roll the dice on Zion as well? Like, you can sell the potential, but those older fans up there are probably scarred given all that they've seen with the injuries over the years.
Right. For real. Yeah, it just sucks to be Portland, but Portland, they're trying their best to keep Dame happy. In a related note, Kurt Hyland of the Blazers is reporting that they are trying to package the number 3 pick plus Anthony Simons to pair for a star to pair with Dame. Do you think that that's enough to be able to keep Dame in Portland, considering that Jeremy Grant has said, at least in the media, that he wants to re-sign and plans to re-sign with Portland?
I think it could. Obviously it depends on who that star is coming back in return. Damian's contract is not going to be easy to move. He's going to make a lot of money over the next few years. He's earned it, for sure. But you're trying to build a contender, that kind of hurts you on both ends. Like, in terms of Portland, how do you build around him? And then if you're going to move him, what do you get back in return? The 3rd pick plus Simons might be the easiest thing to do in terms of making a move to bring in a star. I don't know. They're in a really tough spot. I think they're like the Washington Wizards of the West, where they're just kind of stuck in that NBA purgatory that nobody wants to be in. It's like right in the middle of the league.
Yeah, but at least they didn't make the playoffs. They're a playoff contending team outside of this season. Whereas the Wizards, it's been a while. But yeah, I mean, it's Dame time. So, like, I feel like, listening to Chris Haynes, he was saying, there's been a lot of hypotheticals thrown out there. If Dame were to leave, where would he go? And Chris Haynes said it's the Nets or it's the Heat. we already talked about the destination of the Heat and the cash strap issue that they have. And I don't know that they have a ton of assets to even offer Portland, to be honest, to get there. Or that's exciting enough for Portland to be like, yeah, I'm willing to trade my perennial all-star for him. The Nets, they have a lot of draft picks, but I mean, I feel like they're going to have to come off of at least Cam Johnson to make that happen. And, you know, a bunch of expiring deals like Spencer Dinwiddie and Joe Harris. Like, I don't know that I get excited about that either. As much as those destinations might be ideal for him, I don't know that either team really has enough to really compensate for what Damian Lillard is and what he means to this Portland franchise.
Yeah, Cam's going to be a restricted free agent this summer. So maybe you work out a sign and trade.
Yeah.
As part of that, you know, Dinwiddie, Joe Harris going to the final years of their respective contracts, as you mentioned. I don't know. I think obviously Brooklyn's not going to be letting go of Nick Claxton or Mikal Bridges, so
it shouldn't.
No use even asking for those guys. But yeah, if you can figure out something with Cam Johnson in terms of re-signing him, then and moving him, if that's what they want to do, that might be their best course of action. Because in terms of established players, they don't really have the assets, I think, that you'd be able to get another team to willingly take on while leaving Mikal and Nick alone.
Right. Yeah. And, at this point, I just wouldn't move. As you said, I wouldn't move anything. I'd probably be willing to move everybody but Mikal and Nick Claxton at this point. But I just don't. Dorian Finney-Smith, not excited. You know, Seth Curry, not excited. There's just a bunch of non-exciting people that would be a part of that package that I feel like Portland wouldn't be inclined to move on. Khris Middleton had knee surgery, but he's expected to be back and ready in July. I believe he's a restricted free agent as well. Do you think that he's going to return to Milwaukee? I think it makes sense for him to. I doubt he's going to try to go test the market here when it's been so profitable being in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think he'll be back. Player option and pay him a little over $40 million to opt out of that. I don't know if he's going to be able to get similar money on the open market. Maybe he can, but I think the knee injury that you finally had operated on, he's out the wrist surgery that he went through last season, before this season, I should say. It can be hard pressed to get that kind of money, even with his productivity when healthy. So I agree with you. I think he'll be back in Milwaukee.
And we'll close out with the Knicks. Josh Hart is opting out of his contract, but he wants to stay with the Knicks. What do you think the chances are he does stay in the Mecca?
I think they're high. They gave up a first-round pick for him in that trade with Portland. His impact on winning, you know, once he arrived there was huge. You know, whether he was coming off the bench or starting. Yeah, I think he'll definitely be back. Just a matter of how much it's going to cost. They have ample room to make something happen. So I'm not too concerned. I think Josh Hart will definitely be back, and I think he'll be a key figure for them moving forward.
And in terms of drafting, do you still feel comfortable drafting him? He was a top 75 player this year, but much of that production came from when he was on Portland. Do you still feel comfortable drafting him in a top 80 range, 7th, 8th round pick?
I do. I think you can probably even wait until the 9th round in some leagues, but I think 7th or 8th, late 7th into the 8th, I think that's a perfect spot for him, given all that he provides from a production standpoint. Yeah,
and make sure you guys tap in with us next week. Now it's officially the offseason. We want to say thank you for officially completing our first 2023 season with Roundball Stew with me and Raph. So thank you guys for joining with us, whether you're tapping in at our live stream or listening on the podcast. Thank you very much. We're going to continue to march on, man. The draft is coming up. We're going to have a great episode next week where we'll go into the draft, what it means from a rookie perspective, who's going to be making their impacts, what destinations certain players are being tied to, and so much more. So make sure you tap in with us yet again next week. Same time, same place, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. With that, Raph, have a good one, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Thank you.